Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I am DevOps Rob. Before we get started with today's video, I just want to give a shout out to all the new subscribers to the channel. I just want to say I really appreciate you. Happy to make more content like this for you. You know, it's been a hell of a journey since I started creating YouTube videos, and you know, now with the channel hitting more than 200 subscribers, it's just an absolute blessing. So thank you so much. Today, I'm making a video about going through the interview process for tech jobs, especially if you're going for your first or early stage career tech job interviews. Now, I feel a bit compelled to make this video just simply because I've been speaking to a lot of people who are looking for their first job or have got their first job, or they're just in the early stages of their career. And I'm hearing them make the same mistakes that I myself made when I was earlier on in my career. And I didn't have anyone to tell me any different. So, you know, I have the experience, I've been telling them, but I feel like it's best I just make a video and put it out there for anyone who is in the process of looking for their first job in tech, or, you know, if they've had their first job and they're looking to make the move to the second job, some key things to really try and home in on as you're going through the process. So we'll get started just with a bit of a side point I want to make about the interview process. So firstly, what I want to say is when you're interviewing, try and take that as an opportunity to learn something. Now, personally, every time I go into any interaction in life, I try to walk out of it richer in knowledge than I went into it. And interviews are no exception to that. So in terms of the interview process, it could be things like you are asked a question and maybe you don't know the answer. It's perfectly fine to say, I don't know, but try to be inquisitive about what the answer is and try to get some nuggets so that after the interview, you can go away and you can research it, and then you'll be wealthier in knowledge on that specific thing. If you go through things like coding challenges, for example, and you notice that you're a bit weaker in a particular part of the coding challenge, again, this is a really good action to take away from that, and you know what to work on to strengthen your skill set. So try to walk out of the interview process richer in knowledge. It should never be a waste of time. Whether you're offered the role or not, you should walk out of that saying that was a good experience, and just try to get the most out of it. But the main thing I really want to talk to you about today is the concept that I have, which a lot of people don't seem to be practicing this, of interviewing a company as much as they're interviewing you. So it needs to be a two-way fit, and there's no shame in interviewing a company. So let's look at it from the company's perspective for a second. So the process they may put you through could be something like a telephone interview, where they'll ask you a series of questions just to gauge some basic competency levels and, you know, just basic things like that. Maybe things like salary requirements, just to make sure they can afford you, and just some basic things, right? So that's their first step of due diligence. The second stage, just depending on what the company is, could be anything, but in a lot of cases, it might be a coding challenge. So in the coding challenge, they're either trying to ascertain exactly where you are from a skill-based point of view, or they're just trying to ensure that you're competent enough to actually do the role. Either way, that's them just making sure that you are in one way a good fit for them or not. And then they'll have maybe a third phase where you meet the team or you meet the hiring manager. And this is generally speaking more of a personality kind of test. They want to see if your personality fits in well with the team. And that's perfectly fine. As a candidate going for a role, we should interview the company with equal scrutiny, right? So what you have to do that, it's not a case of just coming up with a series of questions just for the sake of asking questions. You have to have a strategy. Now, in general, my strategy is I'm always, when I'm looking for a job, also looking for the next job after that. And the reason why is it lets me know what I need from my next role in order to get to the next goal after that. So if, for example, I want a job that requires a certain set of skills which I do not possess, well, I'm going to look for a job that gives me the opportunity to acquire these skills so that I can get to my goal when I decide to move on from this role. So with that strategy in mind, I'll give you a personal example of a stage in my career a few years back. And I had the ambition of contributing more to the open source community and just engaging more in community activities. So I was looking for a company who was going to support that effort. They were going to give me the room, the space and the encouragement to do these things. So I came up with a series of questions to ascertain which companies were a good fit in terms of me achieving that ambition. So things like I would ask them if they had an issue with employees speaking at meetups or conferences. Now that might seem like a bit of a weird question, but there are companies out there that do not really want their employees speaking at meetups and conferences for different reasons. It's not necessarily a good or a bad practice, it's just a case of, is it a good fit for me? And in general, that's probably not a good fit. I'd also ask them things about if they host meetups in their office premises and if they sponsor any meetups or anything like that. These things can give you a good gauge as to how the company sees community activities. That's not to say that if they do not host or sponsor any meetups that they are against these kind of community activities, but if they are doing it, then I think it's a very good thumbs up that you can kind of take from the process and have a bit more confidence in what they're saying around that. Also, I'd ask questions about the training budget. So is there a training budget firstly? And secondly, if there is, how much is the training budget? And at some companies, there are some restrictions on what you can spend the training budget on. So you want to be very clear about what these restrictions are and if it aligns with your goals. If there's a particular course that you want to do, are you going to be allowed to use your training budget on that? But more in my case is I wanted to start to attend more conferences and be a bit more active in the conference scene. And as we know, conference tickets, they can be quite expensive, especially when they're abroad. So I was looking for a company who would sponsor my participation and attendance to these conferences. So training budget is a good way of getting funding to go to a conference. So you can ask questions like, can I use my training budget to attend conferences which are relevant to the role? Some companies will allow it, others will not. Some will actually sponsor your attendance to the conference separately to a training budget. So it's good to try and ascertain these things in the process. I would also ask about my prospective team members as well. So I'd try to meet the team if I could. This is a good opportunity, even if it's just a quick 5-minute hello. It means that when I send them a LinkedIn request, they'll know exactly who I am and the chances are they'll accept it. That gives me the perfect opportunity to really interview the company, because now I can speak to someone who's going to be a colleague and ask them about their experiences working for that company, especially with my goals in mind. So have they attended any conferences which are sponsored by the company? If they haven't, are they aware of anyone that has within the organization? There's so many different questions you can ask them if you start to form that relationship and build. So try to interview the company as much as you can. The questions I've asked, I'm not saying that you should go ahead and go and ask those questions to any prospective employer. What I'm saying is you should develop a strategy which aligns with your career goals and figure out what you need from the company in order for that company to help you get to your goals. And then you can come up with a series of questions which will allow you to ascertain whether they are a good fit or not. And a couple of tips I'll give you around that as well is, firstly, when you come up with these questions, and this is from personal experience, I used to come up with the questions and they would be in my head and I would memorize them. I'd totally remember them until I get into the interview situation. And then I would start to ask the questions, but then I would forget one or two of the questions and there would be quite key things that I needed to ascertain. So advice from myself to myself and to you is, when you come up with these questions, try and write it down on a notepad or put it in your phone or something like that. And when you're in the interview situation, do not be afraid to pull out a notepad and actually go through the questions one by one and tick them off as they're answered. And don't be afraid to write down the answers that you receive as well, because then you can take those away without any confusion. You can go and research and verify where possible that the information is actually accurate before you come to any kind of conclusions. The next tip is try to ask as many of the questions as you can as early on in the process as possible. So when you have, for example, a telephone interview, if you have the opportunity to ask questions then, try to start that level of conversation at that point there. you may hear some answers that do not align very well with where you want to go with your career. So if that's the case, then you can pull out of the process pretty early, and you've saved yourself time and you've saved the company time. And all around, everyone wins, because it was never going to be a good fit anyway. So don't be afraid to pull out of the process if you hear things which are red flags to you in terms of your career aspirations. So I'll just leave you with some final thoughts just for you to just think about and let it marinate in your mind. Is this is your career, right? This is your journey. It's your development, right? It's your responsibility to take care of that and make sure that it's moving forward in the right direction. So try to take some of the advice that I've given you today and apply that when you're going through the interview process. Try to use these techniques to, mitigate the risk of spending too much time in the wrong role or at the wrong company. Because time is precious. We don't get time back at the end of the day. So if you can ask the right questions and just ascertain which companies are good for you and which are not so good, I think you'll just save yourself a lot of time, and your career will progress at a more steady and quicker pace. So I hope you found this useful. Please, please, please share this with anyone who is looking for a job in tech, especially people who are looking for their first few jobs within tech. These are very key parts of your career journey. So it's important to sort of make the right decision. So like I say, please share it with anyone like that. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to sit down and talk with people and just share my experiences. And yeah, I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give it the thumbs up. It always helps the channel. If you're new here to the channel and you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. It will be a lot of content like this around getting into tech or just progressing in tech, and just sharing a lot of my journey and some of the things I've learned along the way that may or may not help you along your journey. But that's it from me. I'm DevOps Rob, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace out.